Okay, well, welcome to webinar number 3 of this series.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody, and a hearty welcome to everybody joining us live and those of us who will be watching this later on. So this is all about trying to pick the brains of Dr. David Lowe, having completed his doctorate in humour and coaching, and get some great top tips for us as coaches and developing coaches in how we can enhance our practice and maybe bring some humour into the settings. So the first two webinars, we were looking at some of the underpinnings of coaching and using those as a lens to look at humour in coaching. And today we're going to dive down a little bit further into one of those areas and look at what David found in his research. So over to you, David. What are we talking about today?
Today, there's a number of areas, as I said, that we've looked at before. This is very much today about looking at how spontaneous humour showed up in the coaching relationship. So there's a number of areas of focus, if people remember back to our images that I shared before. So we have this diagram of what coaching is, and then there were a number of images that we talked about, like presence and trust and bonding, that we went into in all of those. So as well as connection, trust, and bonding, we're also going to look at authenticity. Now, I just want to add that this is a descriptive, not instructional discussion. So we're not saying this is what you have to do. It's just this is what I found. Okay, so it's what was experienced in real coaching dyads between coach-client, rather than being a how-to guide.
Okay, so we're talking about using humour or discovering humour in the relationship. Perhaps we could start with the early parts of a relationship. Tell me about that. I can imagine that's quite a tricky time to use humour when you don't know each other so well yet.
Yes, and important that this is the research I looked into was about the coach using humour and the client using humour. It was very much this two-way thing, but we'll come to that later. But humour did appear at the start, but there was sometimes this gap. But let's look at the benefits. So what it helped was reducing tension in that first time meeting. So two people not had a coaching relationship before. So my research was not with existing clients. It was with new people who were participating in the research. So I had not coached them before. So there is an interesting maybe follow-up study of how does it look as we go through time in a longitudinal kind of manner. But right from the first meeting, it could help reduce tension. It created a more relaxed atmosphere, and it encouraged openness and approachability.
Mm-hmm. And did the humour work the same every time you encountered it?
No. I should elaborate, probably, shouldn't I? No, every moment was pretty individual. It depended on the pairing between the coach and the client. So there was obviously that contextual element, but also lots of cultural and relational context. So I didn't look, as I said, didn't look at it over time. So that may well develop and change as we go. But it was very much there in terms of that, helping that openness, helping that that I'm trying not to ruin all of the surprises where we're going in a minute, but that starting work helped people feel that they were in the room, had that human connection, had that relationship building with this new person that they'd not met before. And there was an important part about them humour helping people feel that they were an individual and that they were being talked to as a real human being.
So I'm hearing two really important things there. This first thing about releasing tension and lightening the mood just in that kind of interaction. But you're also saying that it starts to work on the relationship, the coach-coachee relationship, even at that early stage.
Yeah. So I've described it as helping people develop mental models of each other. So that human to human connection, how do I start to think about you? How does the client start to think about me? So we're building that picture, if you like, of who the other person is, and that helps very much. Humour can help very much with that, without a lot being disclosed, without going very deep on who you are and what your beliefs are and all of that. Humour allows people to see and get that kind of insight into who people are, so that you can start building those models.
Yeah, you write quite a bit in your doctorate about how people respond when humour shows up. Why did you find that to be a particularly important element for you?
Without going into masses load of humour theory, nearly every type of humour needs a source, so someone giving the humour, so the humour attempt, and the receiver, right? Or the hearer, I've called it, but obviously it's not always sound. It could be a visual thing as well. So facial expressions, hand movements, all of those things, they're all a humour attempt. But there's always this element of someone receiving, comprehending, and then responding. So there's kind of a number of stages on this. First of all, I need to understand that what you're saying is a humour attempt, or an attempt at humour. So I need to see that you're meaning it to be humorous. And often there's that.
Excuse me.
Often there's a cue. Maybe it's kind of like either a pause or a different type of speaking or whatever. But some kind of cue that the humour is coming. Some recognition that you understand that humour, or some comprehension of that humour, and then the receiver is deciding, well, actually, is that funny to me or not? So the important part here is whoever is the speaker and whoever is the hearer, whether that's coach being speaker or client being speaker, the other person, it's important that they acknowledge that they've heard it, even if they're choosing not to respond to it. So my initial thought was about humor is in coaching was, do people just ignore it or try not to use humor when they feel it's a risk, right? So the overall premise, a client or the coach uses humor, there's a risk that it could be misunderstood and it could harm the relationship. So some people might say, well, therefore, I'm just going to not use humor. It's safer. But what my research found is that not responding, whether that's deliberate or not, also has risks. So there is a risk of whatever you want to call it, disconnection or distance between the humor giver and the receiver. So if I am the coach and you're the client, for example, and you make a humorous attempt and I choose not to respond to it, or I just don't recognize it as humor and therefore don't respond, it can have that harm of, okay, this person isn't, I'm not connecting with this person as much. So there is an argument that even weak humor attempts mattered. I'm not saying you should laugh at everything everybody says, but it's not an easy option to just not include humor in coaching. So you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you do use humor, there is a risk that it might be misunderstood or misinterpreted or harm the relationship, whether you're coach or client. But also not using it and deliberately avoiding it can also have that risk. And so there's no easy option, if you like.
Well, I'm certainly hearing you say there that any kind of response to the humour is a way of giving permission or even withdrawing permission, but there's something there that's important about giving some kind of signal that it's okay or not okay.
Yeah. And some clients in the research, some clients described it as getting this permission or green light, if you like. And so that was allowing them, if you like, they kind of saw it as, okay, humor is okay in this setting, because some people come to coaching never having had it before, don't really know what it is, we obviously, in our contracting and our chemistry sessions, or all of those meetings and anything that we send to people before, try to build that sense of comfort and openness. But some people might not be sure of what can I say in this coaching session. So it's important for coaches to be looking for, okay, how is the client responding in terms of, or what am I getting the vibe from them in terms of comfort in the session, in their reception of what is being said and what we're talking about, but also how is this trust, what is going on in terms of trust. So it's, unfortunately, humor is not an easy situation, not just because it's that, do I use it, do I not use it, but also it's sometimes not even verbal. It's sometimes it's a sense, right? We talk about sense of humor, but I know I'm sensing that this is a humorous exchange between us, because we're not talking about, a man and a dog walk into a pub. We're not talking about jokes. We're talking about spontaneous humor that just appears, and it may be very small and very seemingly insignificant. And this is part of the problem when you start talking about humor and writing about humor and putting humor into an academic environment. Immediately everything becomes unfunny, right? Because if you try and deconstruct a joke, it's not funny, right? This is the problem. So think about, if you watch a conversation between two people, it may be easier than trying to watch your own conversation, but you'll see that there'll be these little humor elements, and they're not rolling around on the floor laughing, but they are still a humor attempt, right? And so there's no rules around it. There's no flow chart for it. It's that sense, or that kind of feeling that we're getting.
I'm feeling a sense of danger here in using humor in our work. Did you discover that showing up?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure that Ricky Gervais is ever going to be a coach, but yeah, there is definitely risk. So coaches reported being worried about things like being misjudged, about damaging that trust between people, between the client and them, or appearing incompetent even. And I noticed this in myself. So the research was not just with participants, with coaches and clients, but it was also looking at my personal feelings about these things and my performance and stuff like this. And so I noticed very much that humor is, I do see humor as a risk, and there is a high element of self-regulation. Like, what am I actually saying? People who have met me in a social environment may know that I quite like a riskier side of humor. Right? I hold the view that everything can be humorous in a specific context, but I'm not going to bring that into a coaching session. So there is this risk of authenticity and appropriateness.
Yeah, so we're moving into a slightly different grouping now, I guess. And you mentioned at the beginning of our session today that you're going to be exploring authenticity in some more detail. Do you have a slide that shows that in a bit more detail, David?
Do I have a slide? I'm going to have to insert a slide after the session of this.
Oh, okay.
I do have one, and I will find it, and I will put it onto here in 2 seconds. So I suppose while I'm trying to do two things at once, which is always a risk, one of the key things for me, and this is why it came up why the whole research came up to some extent, is because I use humor a lot, or humor comes up for me. Oops, I've taken the wrong picture off. Humor comes up for me throughout my life. And so this isn't just a thing of, I like going to comedies, or I like going to stand up, or whatever. This is, humor is a core value of mine, and feeds into that fun that is a driving force for me. So this picture that I'm sharing now is the findings on these on the triangle, if we've got approachability, constructive mental models, trust, bonding, affinity, they're kind of the layers of that relationship building. But all the way through that there is this authenticity that is running through it. So many people, including me, found or reported humor to be an important part of who they are, and that's certainly the case for me, or attempting humor, maybe I should say. And clients do notice. We've talked about this a lot in coach education, but clients do notice when a coach is being themselves, right? They can see when someone is being authentic, and when someone's not. And so this having authenticity often gave the clients permission to be authentic as well, so that they could tell us those things that they maybe haven't said to other people and things like that. And it was an implicit thing as well here, though, right? So by being ourselves, by using our humor that comes naturally and pops into our heads and is within the realms of appropriateness, it reinforces that statement of, this is an authentic relationship between these two people.
Yeah, I can really feel the tension there. And this is a subject that is in great debate at the moment amongst coaching circles. The question of how much of ourselves should we bring into the coaching relationship. From one side, we say we're very much in service of the client, and therefore we want to be them. For them, it's not about us, and that's very important. And yet we also talk about authentic partnering. And we can't really be an authentic partner unless we bring our authentic selves into that space. So I can really feel that that's an important issue for you, but a tension about how much is too much.
Yeah, and there's this appropriate sweet spot maybe of between my authentic self, but the professional boundaries that we have in our coaching situation. Right? As I said, we're different people. And so without going into the whole theory of self, I believe that each person has multiple selves. And I'm not talking about split personalities. I'm talking about the fact that I can be authentic in a setting with my friends, and I can be authentic in a coaching environment, and I can be authentic when I'm meeting my elderly neighbors. But I'm not behaving the same way in each of those three situations. But just because my behavior is different doesn't mean I'm being inauthentic in any of them. Right? So, there's an appropriateness that our mind kind of tells us. In this context, this is an acceptable portrayal of myself.
That's a brilliant.
So I said I'm not going to go into it, and then I did go into it, but yeah.
But really valuable, David, and thanks for sharing that. I think that's a really valuable way of explaining what we mean when we talk about authentic partnering. And we're in different contexts, and we bring different parts of ourselves to the fore, and that's absolutely fine. It's just a question of finding that right channel to bring the humor into that space. Great. So you've mentioned this humor showing up spontaneously. So does that mean that we should never be planning our humor or planning our jokes in advance?
I mean, yes. In short, yes, it does. So the coaches in the study rejected planned humor, or listening in order to bring in humor. So they're a distracting element. If we're thinking, oh, okay, when can I jump in? That's along the sign of that's alongside those moments of, well, I'm thinking about the question to ask them next, right? That takes us out of our deep listening, where we're focusing on our client. So it's certainly not about planning when to use some kind of humor. It's spontaneous. It doesn't require lots of effort. Doesn't pull us away from listening to our client. However, and this is, again, you think things are simple. It's a bit like DIY. You think, oh, this is an easy job. It will get done in 2 minutes. But the problem is even clarifying, what do I mean by spontaneous humor? Well, I might have a phrase. So I use certain phrases. one that comes to mind and that I wrote in the thesis was about if I say, or I'm asking a client, if you could wish for anything, what would you wish for? If I had a magic wand, or one of those kind of phrases. And I've once phrased it of, if I was your hairy godfather, what would you wish for? Right? Now, if I use that again, I'm still being spontaneous. I'm not planning, when can I drop this hilarious line in, right? But it's, and this is what I meant about when you start to look into, is that a humor attempt? But that's still spontaneous. I'm not planning on when to use it. And I might bring in a variation on it. I've still included that as spontaneous, but it's not that I'm planning on inserting this joke at that time. Nothing's ever straightforward, right?
You really reminded me of something that we teach in our program about different levels of listening, and that kind of level 1 or level 0, where you're just waiting for the mouth to stop moving so you can do your thing. And what we're really talking about here is that deep level 3 listening, where we're really connected with our clients, and we can feel that tacit knowledge that's welling up inside of us, the impressions, the feelings, the intuitions that come from our work. And I'm guessing humour is a bit like that. It is almost like an intuition that's coming to you.
Yeah, and it's that spontaneity. Now, I've also just thought that we're taking each of these areas or fields that we talked about when I was describing what coaching is in the previous webinars. The relationship, the support, the inquiry, how we're using humor in all of those, all fits together. So if someone only watches this one webinar about how humor is used in coaching in terms of the relationship, it may seem very, very siloed and one-sided and a bit weird. So, they all fit together. These things are all happening at the same time. I'm basically trying to upsell here for people to watch at least the next 2 webinars, talking about support and humor and inquiry in humor. But yes, so let's crack on with the relationship, because we can't do everything in one webinar. So let's just focus on this.
So another aspect of your work with human relationships is about bonding. And I think, again, you've got a nice slide for us to have a look at here.
You keep doing that to me, don't you? Do I? Where is it? That's the question. There's trust. There's bonding. Good. Okay.
There you go.
I've got that. Yeah. Oh, cut you off there. Sorry. Yes. Good. So bonding, and in my original, in this image here, you can see that bonding and has affinity and trust and stuff, things around it. But I've lost my original picture again now, haven't I? Where's bonding? There's bonding.
There it is.
The key or frequent factor that helped bonding or showed bonding emerging was through shared experiences. So where the coach and the client had shared moments, and these could be a variety of things. They were mutual recognition. They were a sense of, I'm sure there's a proper phrase for this and some psychological phrase, but that we get each other, right? I get what you're saying, right? And so using humor for those moments helped bonding.
Mm-hmm. And is this always a light or positive experience that you're having?
No. So again, could be shared sadness, shared fear, shared absurdity, absurdity in the situation. I mean, sometimes people are just laughing about, I can't believe I got into that situation, or I can't believe I felt like that, and it's kind of that, I get that. I can imagine how we as humans get ourselves into that situation. So it's that, it doesn't have to be a positive, funny situation. It could be any of those things. So another factor of this is that some humorous moments became like a shorthand for later in the session, or even later conversations. So a bit like in comedy, you call them callbacks, where you talk about something and then they go through the rest of their act, and then they come back to that, often at the end, but maybe throughout it. So there's this kind of running theme. And that came up naturally in some of the coaching sessions as well, where someone might, I don't know, refer to a can of worms, and then they were kind of building on that image of can of worms and shoving the worms back in the can, and all of these kind of things. So that also helped that that bonding, because it was like, we've got a shared joke here between us, or we've got a shared meaning of something. It's not something that everybody else would understand.
Yeah, sounds like a great opportunity to exercise that competence that we talk of as being cumulative listening, and something that is we do look for as we're kind of scoring coaching conversations, for example. So that's a great thing to be able to create using humour. Great. So you also talk about the role of similarity and bonding. Perhaps you can explain that a bit more.
Yeah, so that kind of builds on what we were just talking about. So that shared experience, but even if it's not been built in that session, it's, I've had a similar experience, or I understand that reference, and so it might not be obvious. There is a whole other discussion about speech communities here, and things like cultural references, or shared experiences as well. But where the communication talks about these scripts. So when I mention, and the example I used in my research was, well, it did use an actual joke. I'm going to include the joke here. So, do you know why the Scarecrow won an award? Again, I didn't say they were funny jokes, right? But why did the Scarecrow win an award?
Win an award?
Because he was outstanding in his field. Okay, so the original script that we've got there is that we've got Scarecrow, we've got an award, and we've got these two kind of mental models, like a bubble chart, if you like, but they don't connect here, right? And so when the punchline comes, there is then some connection. There's field, which is about profession, and the Scarecrow, and so it kind of connects. But if you don't have that same shared script of what a field means, and that a field only for you means a farmer's field, but doesn't mean a professional field, then we're not going to have that similar. We're not going to have that similar response, or you're not going to understand the joke, and you're going to go, well, why did he win an award for standing in the field? It doesn't make sense to me. So there has to be some cultural and lexical, I think that's the word, alignment between people again. And so, getting the joke, or comprehension of the humor attempt, as I would have called it, required that shared meaning, even if it was only for a very brief moment.
So we've dealt with some of the risks and tensions of using comedy, and we've talked about how it can really help with a relationship, and how it works really well. But I'm guessing there's a dark side. So tell me about the dark side, David.
There is a dark side. So again, you'll have to read the thesis for the hilarious examples. Poorly timed humor, for example, could be seen as flippant, demeaning, like you're not listening. Yes, and can have varying responses depending on what you're saying and when you're saying it. But poorly timed humor is one example. The strength of the humor is another factor.
And if you tell the joke that doesn't land, as you gave the example of people not understanding field as being also a professional term, I guess that can also threaten or damage the relationship to some extent.
Yeah. So again, I'm going to refer to it as a humor attempt, because a joke does imply that it is that man walks into a bar kind of thing. But yeah, as I think I said before, when it's not understood, or it lands flat because they, again, don't comprehend those for whatever reasons, whether it's cultural or the structure of the sentence, it is that kind of misalignment, that disconnection. And this happened to me in one of the practice coaching sessions in the research. So about halfway through the session, the client made some attempt at humor, and I recognized it was an attempt at humor, but I didn't understand it. And one of the problems with humor in coaching that differs from normal humor in a conversation is you can't blag it, right? So if someone said, if you made a humorous remark to me and we were in a cafe, I could just laugh at it because I recognize it's a humor attempt, but I don't understand it. So I recognize it, but don't comprehend it. I could laugh or make some other thing like, oh, that's a terrible joke. That obviously has an impact on the relationship if we're in a newer relationship or a coaching relationship. So I saw that this attempt at humor, that what they'd said was an attempt at humor, didn't understand it. And I made it clear that I didn't understand it because, again, there's this authenticity and this honesty. And the client in our interview later and our discussion later said that in their eyes, this had caused a slight disconnection between us. Right? And so on the flip side, the coaches also talked about a deep discomfort when humor caused an offense to their client. The one story that stands out in my mind is that this coach made an attempt at humor with his client. The client didn't say anything at the time, but later contacted them to say that it nearly made them cry. And the coach was absolutely horrified. That hadn't been my intention, was their statement to themselves. I didn't mean to do that. How could I have done that? And so it was, they were slightly traumatized by it afterwards as the coach.
So sometimes we're talking about something with some fragility involved.
Yeah. So it certainly requires what we call in our industry, in our field of emotional intelligence, that self-awareness. We need to be monitoring both what we're doing and what the client is responding to, or let's be more inclusive. The speaker needs to be aware of what the hearer is feeding back to them, as well as how we're feeling about it.
So, David, putting that all together and thinking about humour and the coaching relationship, how would you put this into a nutshell for us?
I would say it plays a formative role, because often it does come first, in connection, trust, bonding, and authenticity. But although it comes early in the relationship, it is also an ongoing factor throughout the relationship.
But it's not completely safe and natural in our work, perhaps.
No. Well, natural is that, again, we'll come back to that, but safe, certainly not. So it is relational, risky, but it also has that power, but it does need to arise naturally and be treated sensitively.
So a powerful tool to be used with care.
Powerful tool. And there was a discussion about, for a new coach, someone who's just starting out, is this another thing that I've got to think about? And I would try to simplify it as, it's okay if you're choosing to withhold your humor, as in you're bringing those humor attempts. But as a minimum, we need to acknowledge the humor being used by our clients, because that will have an impact if we're a brick wall, basically, not acknowledging that.
Okay, so thank you for sharing that, David. It's been really interesting, and I'm sure given our viewers a lot of food for thought about how they can be using humour in building relationships in their coaching. So where are we going next? Let's go back to your big slide of the different areas and tell us what's coming up in our next sessions.
So next week, we're going to look into support, which is the smallest section on this diagram here, but it is very nuanced. So we're talking about emotional, psychological support in the coaching relationship.
Okay.
Now, and I would also encourage people to tell us what their experiences are in humour. Again, my research was a small group of people based and working in the UK. I am now doing some further research, which I will tell people about in a moment if they want to get involved. But yeah, tell us what your experiences are. Again, if it's different or similar to anything we've talked about here, let us know in the comments on it. So
Yes.
if people are interested in my next area of research, so as I said, this research that we're talking about now was very focused on UK people working, living in the UK. I'm now looking at the global humour styles, not just in coaching. So if you go to this short link or click on or do the QR code, there's a very short questionnaire that anybody can answer, coaches, clients, anybody at all. And please share it with others. It'll take less than 5 minutes. It's 18 questions just about your preferences for humour. And everyone can fill it in. So I'm looking for thousands of responses on this. So please do it and share it.
Yeah, fantastic. So just to reiterate, please do give us your comments and thoughts about the use of humour in your coaching. You'll find these videos embedded in our LinkedIn profiles, both David's and mine, and we look forward to hearing what comments you have for us. And apart from that, we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Linda.
Thanks for watching. Goodbye.